this camera is also an emotional thing. It's not only a piece of equipment. It looks good. I mean, if you look at the little grip that they added here, it's really there's a style here. Yeah, combine this with the Zeiss lens, which Zeiss of course is also a brand name, and 61 megapixels, some AI autofocus capabilities because it has now the dedicated chip inside, and you get something which is simply stylish.
What's new in filmmaking technology this week? News, reviews, education, insights, opinions, and ideas from the CineD newsroom with Nino Leitner and Johnny Bahiri. This is Focus Check, the weekly Cinetech podcast.
Welcome everybody to episode 73 of CineD Focus Check podcast. My name is Nino and it is my pleasure to have Johnny back on the podcast again. How are you doing in Japan?
I'm great. Still traveling around, lots of work. Sorry, this is the hotel room behind me, and it's very hot, very humid, and then suddenly huge rain. But that's Japan, especially in the rainy season. Very humid, but as I said 1,000 times, you can't complain. It's Japan. How are you, Nino? How are you doing?
All good. It's also warm here, but especially in the studio actually. But other than that, everything is good. Let's dive right in. This week, we will talk about the Panasonic LUMIX S1II lab test part 2. We had to do a part 2 because the dynamic range boost was fixed. And now we got amazing results. So that's what we will start with. We'll also talk about the newly announced Sony RX1R 3, which is an update to a camera that the last version, the Mark II, came out 10 years ago. Can you believe it? That's a compact full-frame flagship camera with a fixed lens and a 35mm lens. And now we have its third generation here. We'll talk about a very interesting plugin for DaVinci Resolve, which is emulating lenses, but not just, with AI or whatever. It's really based on actual lenses that were measured, and you can emulate various aspects of those lenses. So that's very, very interesting. We'll talk about Simmod lens for two reasons. Small company, but, from a filmmaker that you will, tell us more about. But he introduced two things. First of all, a NATO ring for like a mounting solution to mount motors, LiDAR, and more directly on Cine lenses. But more interestingly, Simmod is also entering the lens market, introducing two lens lines that we'll talk about. We'll mention RØDE, which is giving away a wireless micro camera receiver for all the existing customers of the wireless micro system, which is amazing. We'll talk about the introduction of the Accsoon CineView M7 and M7 Pro monitors that we covered during NAB this year, but now they're available. We'll talk about a very tiny new light. If you still need a gift for, I don't know what, $35 light from NANLITE, the NANLITE Pico RGBW pocket light could be useful in the gear bag. We'll talk about an amazing article that our dear writer Masha wrote about extra shot for safety, yes or no, an educational article about coverage in film. Like, when do you need coverage? What is coverage for? What filmmakers do a lot of coverage? And then also about some others that despise it. There's quite a bit discussion on this topic on our social media, so I'm going to highlight that. And then we move to our AI section. I think we should make an AI section every week now and just group those articles together. First of all, I wrote about a week ago about YouTube setting. They're planning to crack down on what is called AI slop. So, like cheaply mass-produced generative AI content that is really flooding every platform right now. They're cracking down on that by demonetizing those channels, and we'll dive into that topic a bit. We'll also talk about a more productive AI, I would say, that is Eddy AI, introducing a scripted mode for their, editing assistant. And now you can upload scripts and footage and get an instant rough cut, and Johnny's going to talk about that. And then last but not least, we'll talk about a commercially safe AI model, a generative video model called Marey from a company called Moonvalley. And they claim this is targeted at pro filmmakers and it's commercially safe because it's only trained on material that they have the rights to. So that's interesting too. But let's start off with the lab test. So we originally tested the Panasonic LUMIX S1II in the lab not so long ago. I think when it was introduced, 1 or 2 months ago, 2 months ago maybe. And what did we discover, Johnny? There was something, I mean, the results are good. In general, it's a camera that has a lot of features, which is extremely, it just packs a lot of features in a relatively affordable package. But there was one thing that we discovered that didn't work, right?
That's right. I mean, that camera has this DR boost on off mode. And the idea was when the DR boost mode is on, you're obviously getting extended dynamic range. Now, when Gunther, Florian, and I were testing the camera, Gunther found out actually that that's not working as advertised. And like we do normally do with manufacturers when we test the cameras in the lab, because of course there's a lot of responsibility here when you come and say, hey, this camera has such and such dynamic range values. We notified Panasonic, and there was a very nice, fruitful, friendly conversation about how to improve. And Panasonic was kind enough to go back and check, and they verified that DR boost on is not working as it should have been working. They went back to the drawing board and did their own magic. And now, when I think it was a few days ago, when the firmware update was released, that was fixed. So Gunther and Florian went back to retest the camera, and now they found out that finally it's working as advertised. And not only that it's working, when you are filming on the 5.8K in ProRes RAW, this is 12-bit by the way, you get an amazing value, something that you can really compare to Arri, Alexa, LF basically. Yeah, so one thing which is very important to note here, the ProRes RAW is extremely capable. The thing with Panasonic, and this is as far as I'm concerned, when you move to the compressed video codecs, I think this is still a bit of an issue because the noise reduction is working very, very strong. And then, yeah, maybe the picture, at least for my taste, is not as if I would have wanted to be because it's too smooth. But back to the lab test, we are really pleasantly surprised to see first that Panasonic did tackle the issue. DR boost on is now really working, and the results are very good. You know, maybe you want to talk about the downside when the DR boost is on. So dynamic range is much better, but of course there's some limitations.
Yeah, not just dynamic range. I mean, to be a bit more specific here, you mentioned that it's close to Alexa Mini LF. I mean, we are talking about 13 to 14 stops of usable dynamic range, which is unheard of from any camera in this price bracket. I mean, we just haven't seen it. It's amazing. It's really, really amazing. And also the Latitude equals that. We have 10, maybe almost, Gunther calls it, with wiggle room to 11 stops of usable Latitude. Now, what is Latitude? We mention this every time, but I think it's important, is basically when you over and underexpose your image, you can still, with noise reduction, you can push it back to normal and still have a usable image. And that is what Latitude is. So basically quality in an image that can be enhanced to a way that it still looks organic and neutral, even though it's not perfectly exposed. Because in reality, sometimes it's not perfectly exposed. In this case...
More than that.
Sorry?
More than that, it's a really stress test for the sensor. I think this is very important to say. What companies are trying to hide with some noise reduction and so on, you can't hide stuff in the Latitude test.
Exactly. The dynamic range can be fooled. The dynamic range test, which is this IMA test, because of noise reduction. So for example, when we did the lab test of the iPhone 15 Pro, of course, tiny sensor has more noise, and Apple adds a lot of noise reduction, as all the smartphone manufacturers do, and anybody who builds a small sensor into anything. But that falls apart as soon as you do the Latitude test, because then you will see the actual performance of a sensor. And this, in this case, it also performed really well. So 10 stops Latitude is amazing. But there is this huge downside, of course, which means that because of the dynamic range boost, the way these dynamic range boosts work is they combine exposures, essentially. So they read out the sensor quickly and then combine it. What that happens, that also amplifies rolling shutter issues. So you basically double the rolling shutter, or actually slow down. Yeah, it's like twice as slow. So we have about 27 milliseconds or something, which is an extremely bad result for a rolling shutter result. Now you have to take that with a grain of salt, of course, because there are occasions where this simply does not matter. If you are filming an interview of somebody in, in a high contrast environment, let's say you have a window in the background or whatever, this might not matter because your camera is not moving, right? So 27, you will not want to use that as a handheld shot, of course, if you have such a rolling shutter result. But for locked off shots like that, where there's not a lot of movement in the frame, it's absolutely okay. And also one thing that Gunther points out is that it's all about compromise, and this performance comes at this price that you have to pay, which is really this 27.5 millisecond rolling shutter result, if you want this maximum latitude here. However, you can, of course, he's suggesting have a good compromise and crop to the APS-C mode for ProRes RAW, and then you will end up with a cropped result, of course, but then have 18.7 milliseconds, which is already a lot better. Not great, but a lot better than the 27.5. And actually, we're talking about also comparing this to Alexa cameras. I mean, the Alexa 35 is the best camera in terms of performance for when it comes to latitude that we have tested, and that is a super 35 millimeter camera. So you will have something that is not that far away from that Alexa 35 if you crop in and have 18.7 milliseconds. So that's absolutely an amazing result. I think it's safe to say that technically this camera is probably the best bang for the buck you can get right now in terms of performance. I mean, correct me if you see it differently, Johnny, but from all the cameras we've looked at in terms of at how advanced mirrorless cameras are, it seems like the Panasonic LUMIX S1II is definitely giving the best performance.
Yep, it's a very capable camera, and the possibilities are endless. But at the same time, first of all, I don't want people to think that they're getting a mini Alexa in any way, because the color science is a bit different. And of course, if you buy the license to apply the RE Log-C 3, then you're getting a bit closer here, because again, to my taste, the colors, the skin colors with Panasonic LUMIX are too red. That's to my taste. And don't forget that if you're working with ProRes RAW, the limitation is that you cannot edit the footage in DaVinci Resolve. So
not natively, yeah.
On one, that's right. So on one hand, you have a very capable camera, but then when you start editing, you might run into some difficulties if you are on DaVinci Resolve, which is of course very popular, and skin colors, or if you use any of the compressed files, including ProRes, by the way. Not only ProRes RAW is fine, yeah, but ProRes itself, you will notice that the image is very smooth, maybe too smooth. But yeah, it's a very nice camera.
So our requests to manufacturers never end. So to Panasonic, if you're listening, please work on the skin tones and work on the fact that we don't want noise reduction kind of forced upon us if we're not shooting ProRes RAW, right? We also need a way to disable as much as possible noise reduction when we're shooting any H.265 or H.264 codecs. So, yeah.
Any color, when you're filming, any color can be fooled, but one color, which is the skin tone. This is something that people recognize. And that has to be a certain reference here. And I mean, you can claim that anything in this room has a different color, but the skin tone.
It's funny you say that. I don't know how people will see it, but I see you quite red on my screen. So I don't know. I hope Felix is able to fix this.
No, I just have the Panasonic LUMIX mask today. But yeah, that's true.
No, yeah, but to summarize, really amazing camera. I mean, it can shoot natively ProRes RAW 5.8K, and now with this amazing Latitude with a dynamic range boost. But just don't have this on at all times and then be disappointed about the rolling shutter. Just use it when it makes sense. Use it when you're not moving the camera much, and just be aware of the rolling shutter issues here. We'll be back after this message from our sponsor.
1 Minute Tips by FUJIFILM and CineD. Let's talk about ND filters. ND stands for neutral density. These filters reduce the amount of light hitting your sensor, and they affect all wavelengths equally, hence the term neutral. Why use them? To retain creative control over your exposure variables. Say you want to shoot wide open and bright sunlight, or keep your shutter speed low enough to keep some motion blur. And ND lets you do just that without having to crank down on other variables. There are a few types. Fixed NDs cut a specific amount of light, usually marked by stop values. Variable NDs let you dial in the strength by rotating the filter. Super handy, but can introduce visible artifacts at higher values. And graduated NDs that fade from dark to clear, great for balancing bright skies with darker foregrounds. Quick tip, while a cheap ND might seem like a steal, they can also introduce an unwanted green color cast, especially in the shadows. So check reviews and test before you buy. 1 Minute Tips. Until next time.
And now back to the show. Good. Let's move on actually to a camera announcement. Now, Sony surprised us with a camera announcement. So we're recording this Wednesday. The podcast comes out on Thursday. So on Tuesday, Sony in the evening suddenly was like, okay, let's announce another camera that, like quite often, we get early embargoed press releases and then we know what's coming. In this case, we had no clue. There's a new camera called the RX1R3. Now, I was like, okay, I wasn't even aware that this segment still existed, actually, when I saw this. And I was like researching on our website, when was the Mark II announced? And I found out it's almost 10 years ago. Can you imagine? It came out in October 2015. Now, apparently, it turns out this camera, which is a full frame, like the predecessor even, is a full-frame camera with a fixed 35mm lens, has been extremely popular, and actually I saw it selling for more than it was originally cost, because I think probably the Mark II wasn't available anymore or something. But what's your take, Johnny? My opinion is that it seems like Sony is racing after Fuji here. We've seen Fuji release a couple of cameras with fixed lenses over the last year, I would say. Last but not least, the GFX 100 RF with a 28mm lens or 35mm, I don't remember, but it's like a fixed lens, large format camera or medium format if you're a photographer. And this is a full frame camera with a fixed lens, and it costs a staggering $5,000, which is surprising. What's your take on this?
I really like that Sony is still able to surprise all of us with such an announcement, because really that was not expected. And for the camera itself, I think there's absolutely a room for those cameras. Even if we always say, the economy is a bit limping and taxes and tariffs, those are the type of cameras that make a company a little bit special. And those are the type of cameras that people would like to buy or pre-order in order to be a bit special. This is not always a rational. I mean, we are talking as professionals, and we try to be very, very rationalist with what we do and what we buy. But this camera is also an emotional thing. It's not only a piece of equipment. It looks good. I mean, if you look at the little grip that they added here, it's really, there's a style here. Yeah, combine this with the Zeiss lens, which Zeiss, of course, is also a brand name, and 61 megapixels, some AI autofocus capabilities, because it has now the dedicated chip inside, and you get something which is simply stylish. And in this very compact form factor, to run outside, do street photography, and even videography, because this camera can do up to 4K 30 frames per second, I think we will be surprised, but I think that it's going to be a success.
Yeah, maybe we should look up what the predecessor cost, because I don't remember. But it's a surprising announcement. I think it's maybe something that they didn't even plan for, and then it seems like something that, you know, they realized how popular Fuji has been with people that are interested in those very, I wouldn't say single-purpose cameras, but like you said, it's more like an emotional kind of purchase for somebody who, you know, I would say maybe average retired doctor who is an enthusiastic photographer or something like that. Probably not professional photographers who would run with this.
I don't know. I mean, you know, you have the Sigma, Sigma, for example, and the Fujifilm that you mentioned. This is all stylized cameras. It's a fashionable thing, and I can see easily how the Sony RX1R3 becoming also very fashionable.
So I'm seeing, I mean, there's only used ones available. You get them for around 2,000, but I think originally the RX1R2 was around $1,000 less, so just over 4,000. So it definitely got more expensive. But yeah, I mean, let's see how those. Will we review this camera, Johnny?
Well, I'm in Japan. In a very open way, I'll check with Sony Japan if they have a unit somewhere in the drawer that they don't need. And again, the video capabilities of this camera maybe are not the strongest, but still 4K up to 30p, probably very strong autofocus capabilities. I just wish that I had the little Blazer anamorphic 1.5 narrow. Sorry, let me rephrase. The Blazer narrow 1.5 anamorphic adapter to put on the camera and make the images a little bit different. But if Sony has this camera available, I'll be happy to take a look and see how it how it is to run and gun with such a small camera again. I love those small cameras.
Cool. Yeah. Well, anyway, nice that there is a new camera. I hope they do well with it, and I just think in general, I also find it's a cool development that we see more and more of these specific purposely built cameras, which is kind of putting intentional limitations on the shooter, right? So like you intentionally don't have all the options anymore. You don't have a zoom, you don't have the option to change the lens. You have a very small full frame camera here that kind of allows you to do street photography in a small package, but it limits you, and that is also very often good for creativity.
Yeah, just one thing, because you said there is no zoom, but because of the sensor size, you are able to, there are 3 modes in it. I think it's 35, 50, and 75 millimeter that you can play with, kind of crop into the image and still have a very high quality, at least photo. I don't know if those are working in video too. This is something to be seen.
Good. Let's move on from real lenses, real cameras to virtual ones. So we had an announcement, very interesting one, from a company called Node Mill. They announced a plugin for DaVinci Resolve called LensNode. Now, this is a vintage lens emulation plugin, which actually is not just your average kind of film look plugin, is based on, it's made by 2 Australian filmmakers, and it's now available for early access. And what they did is they measured dozens and dozens of different lenses. So for example, there is a full list of those lenses. It's insanely long. So for example, there is Cooke S4, there is Canon FD lenses, Voigtlander, Tribe 7 Blackwing, Lomo, Illumina. So actually quite specific, like not the average kind of lens that, is like a mass-produced lens. It's a lot of very specific lenses that are very popular among high-end filmmaking as well. And they measured all of them and kind of put everything into this tool. And what it enables you to do is have emulations of those various lens characteristics, which you can also combine. So you don't have to say that I want this to look like that lens. You can say I want the chromatic aberration of that lens, and I want the bloom of that lens, and I want the vignette of that lens and the fringing of the other lens, and then combine that, which is kind of amazing. Now, I like the fact that this comes from filmmakers, that this is not something that, was invented by a programmer who probably never touched a camera. So which kind of gives me hope that it actually works properly and actually gives you results that are, certainly not the same as actually shooting with those lenses, but close to it. And it seems to give you very granular adjustments of all of those aspects. So there are examples here where you see an original capture, which is, like they're trying to do as neutral as possible, in this case with an RE size ultra prime. And then you move on and then you see the same shot kind of modified to look like shot with a Lomo Illumina and then Helios lenses and so on. And you see those typical differences both in color contrast, fringing, chromatic aberration, all the different lens aspects there. Of course, there's a limit to what you can do, obviously, because everything is dependent on the source material you feed it with. So, of course, you need to feed it kind of with a as neutral but sharp image as possible, right? Because otherwise, it needs that to work with. But yeah, I like that something like this becomes available and is really targeted at filmmakers, I would say, because sometimes I don't see this as something that would replace an actual lens. Like I would not go out and shoot with a neutral lens only to make it look like an other lens in post. But I think very often, and that's what it's useful for, in my opinion, is you will shoot with a set of lenses on your main camera, and then you have B-roll cameras, like additional angles, and that you really only need every now and then. And then it's very hard to mimic that look, right? To kind of in post make that lens on that other camera look like your main set of lenses. And I think that's what this is really, really useful for. What do you think, Johnny?
I think it's also, if you, let's say that you rented some equipment, you finish the production, then you find out that some shots are missing, and either because of budget, time, or whatever, you can't really rent again the same type of lens, then it might become handy to use this feature or this plugin. Otherwise, I think for the independent filmmaker, usually use what you have. You love what you have, and I think that will be probably for bigger productions, honestly.
Yeah, I don't know. I think again, I think it's just, yes, if you forgot a shot or whatever, but I think it could be even a regular thing for smaller productions also. If you have an extra crew running with the less great camera package around to get B-roll shots and just to match them with the main stuff, of course, is very useful, and it looks extremely impressive. I mean, I haven't tried it myself, but the demo video just really shows it looks like actually shot with a lens and not just post-processed, which is really, really impressive. Now, we had a bit of a discussion here in the comments because of the licensing. So basically, I think it's quite fair what they do. I think it's $99 as it's like a discount because it's changing when the final release is out as an early access. I guess they get people interested in this. It's a perpetual license and includes 2 seats, so you can use it for 2 computers at the same time. Now, what is perpetual license? There was a bit of a misunderstanding about that in the comments. that means that you can continue using it, the version you download, for as long as you want. It's not a subscription, which is nice. However, if there are updates, they might want to charge for that, which makes total sense, right? Because development costs money. So I think it's a very fair approach. It's not a subscription. It's a one-time thing. But if there are big updates, they might charge for that. Because some people thought it's just like a subscription, but it's not. Yeah, I think it's a cool thing. It's not, I always like when these software things come from actual filmmakers, because that means that I think a specific kind of attention got into was put into the product that we need on a level of quality that we need, that might not be immediately apparent to somebody who's not from our industry. So that's nice.
Yeah.
Good. Let's move on to Simmod lens. Now, 2 announcements over the last week from Simmod lens. Maybe, Johnny, you want to talk about who's behind Simmod lens for a little bit before we get into that?
Yeah, so I don't know if you guys know Ron Sim. He is a director of photography from Canada. Extremely nice person, and he is running Simmod, which is originally a company that was born to do some modifications and accessories. When I say modifications for lenses and a lot of accessories, from time to time we hear from him bringing to the market new things that you wanted, but you didn't know where to get it because some of the big companies simply don't make it. And he surprised all of us and decided to dive into the endless sea of lenses. And I mean, he must have big balls, I have to say, because it's amazing. Right now, when everybody and their mothers are making lenses, he decided to also do lenses, meaning he has enough experience and expertise. So he teamed up with Sirui, and actually, for the base plan, he is using Sirui lenses, and there are 2 different lines. One is the Lumiere, and the other one is the Prestige. And by the way, the name of the company, or the lens company, is APSARA. And he added like a few tweaks. When they say a few tweaks, I'll explain in a second, because the whole coating and modification and even the assembly is being made in Canada. So Sirui is contributing the base optical expertise here, and then the whole thing moves to Canada, and the final assembly is being made over there. So for the Lumiere, you will have the 24, 35, 50, 70, 75 millimeter T1.4 lenses, and each lens, let me just, those are for mirrorless cameras, and you will have them in E, RF, Z, and L mounts, and each lens will cost $849 unless you want to buy the whole kit, the 4 lenses for $3,299. And then there's the Prestige line, and those are for LPL or PL mount. Each will cost $949. There's 24, 35, 50, 75, and 100 millimeter. All of those are macro primes. There are T2, unless you are dealing with the 75 and 100 millimeter. Those are T2.8. And again, each lens, I said how much is $949, and if you want to buy the complete 5 lens kit, is $4,800. The lenses are already ready for pre-ordering in the APSARA website. You can find the link itself in our article. And I wish Ron and his team, I think both of us, because we like those type of initiatives from individuals, from people who are actually using cameras, using lenses. And I think you can see this in one little feature that he added for the Lumiere. Ron added, it's a battery-powered button that when you press it, you will get the focus marks lit up. So we know how it is. Sometimes in a bit of a dark environment, when you're shooting something, you simply don't see the focus scale. So this little thing is a nice touch, just simply to see the focus scale. But that will be only in the LUMIERE series. What is your take, Nino?
Yeah, like you said, I mean, it's a bold move, of course, in a very saturated market. But I think as far as I see, Rob, I think he's doing a lot of corporate and commercial jobs. I think he knows how much people are always in need of a specific look. Like you want a special look. Like people like using vintage lenses. People like using some lenses that are not available anymore. And then now we have brands like Sirui and other brands, many of them from China, that are making lenses which are giving us now a very affordable way of creating an anamorphic look, but also a spherical look in this case. And but sometimes the housing is simply not ready for prime time when it comes to cinema shoots, right? Like when you were talking about like sets where stuff kind of needs to be very rigid and so on. And maybe also that final touch is missing, that you don't want to add filtration to every lens to kind of modify it. So it's nice that he puts all of that together and kind of makes something that exists into his own thing based on what he probably wants on his own shoots. And another example, like that lens plugin, actually, if it's coming from Filmmaker, it's usually a better product, right? And that's a good example.
Yeah, I just want to add two things just to make it clear. Those are large format lenses. They will cover both of the lines. Yeah, the LUMIERE and the Prestige will cover the Alexa LF open gate, which is really great. That means that that will also, when the Fujifilm GFX Eterna will see the light of day, that will also, you'll be able to work with those lenses. And the other thing is the look. It's the end look, what the lens produces is completely different than Sirui. Yeah, this is more vintage. It has more characteristic. And in all honesty, I would like to touch those lenses because they're very affordable. So I want to see. I always have a problem with clinical lenses. Yeah, people like the clean look on one hand. Me personally, I like already. That's why I love working with anamorphic lenses. It comes off. It's almost like you get an immediate feedback on what you're filming. Yeah, when you see a certain look, it gives you the extra oxygen. Yeah, that's why I prefer the look over clean look. But that's me. So I really hope to touch those lenses soon. And also, we are planning to jump on a call or actually record an interview with Ron, because he has an amazing personal story. And I think if he'll be willing to share it with our audience, we'll be very happy to do this with him.
Awesome. Cool. So that's his new lenses, but he also announced something else, which is the NATO ring. Now, that was a couple of days prior, and that's a cool way of mounting stuff to a camera, which is not an actual cage, right? You don't need to. I'm not a huge fan of cages, I have to say. Like sometimes I find them kind of limiting, and very often I find when hand holding a camera, I kind of lose kind of the touch and feel of some cameras because of the cage buildup around it. In this case, this NATO ring goes around the lens. I think it's flexible between, it's designed for cine lenses with an outer diameter of 80 to 85 millimeters, so it can be adjusted. And on that ring, you can mount various accessories. I mean, there are examples that he published, which is, like even have the hand grip, the DJI hand grip on there. You can, with the LiDAR on top, which is of course a great way of mounting the LiDAR, which is always a little bit of a challenge depending on, like whether you have a free hot shoe or not. So you don't have to use the hot shoe for that. You can put it on top. That's a very nice rig that he built there. And also, like you can use focus motors, can mount focus motors basically directly onto the lens without adding rods, which of course will make the entire rig less heavy and also a little bit more flexible. And so this NATO ring is available now, and I think it's a really, really cool idea to, a different way of mounting accessories to your cinema lens setup. Then the Simmod NATO ring is available now as a single clamp-on lens ring with NATO rail receiver for $149. And then there is also a 4-ring kit. So if you want to have multiple of those for your entire lens kit, of course, because you will otherwise have to change every time you swap lenses. So a 4-ring kit is $700. So that's pretty cool. I definitely want to check that out too, because I think it looks like a very, very useful solution. All right, let's move on to some audio news. So Rode, we all getting a little bit spoiled, I would say, and confused at the same time by so many different wireless audio solutions. I mean, we talked about this before. This was an area where only a couple of years ago, there was very, very limited choice when we talked about budget audio transmitters. And now we're literally flooded with them from a lot of manufacturers. And there is so much competition in there because, of course, every creator, even people who are not calling themselves filmmakers, but people who are, like making videos for social media and so on, they need proper audio. Now, there's a lot of different options out there from companies such as Rode, of course, Holyland, DJI, Saramonic, many, many, many others. And it's getting more and more and more. And now there is usually also separate solutions for cameras and for phones, right? So a lot of the manufacturers now have 2 different lines. One is really exclusively for cameras and one is exclusively for smartphones. Now we already see them kind of converging. So we are about to actually review the Holyland Lark Max 2, I think it's called, which actually offers you both things, right? You can use it on cameras and on smartphones, and more of those solutions start to open up. And I guess that's something that Rode also recognized, because they have a product called the Wireless Micro, which is specifically made for smartphones. So that came with a smartphone. It comes with a smartphone receiver and 2 transmitters that are literally just little microphone transmitters that you clip on your shirt or whatever, and then the receiver goes at the bottom of the smartphone with a USB-C connector or Lightning, depending. And now they already had, if you remember, a couple weeks ago, they announced that there is now a way to connect them via Bluetooth, the transmitters, directly to the phone without using the receiver, which of course already makes it easier to use because you don't need to carry the receiver necessarily. You can just bring the transmitter. What they're doing now is adding an additional piece of hardware to that kit that was originally targeted only at smartphone users. And it's called the Wireless Micro Camera Receiver, and that's literally what it is. It looks like the camera receiver we already have in the Wireless Go 2 and also the Wireless Pro, but it is a little bit more basic in a sense that it doesn't have an LCD screen. It only has an LED strip on top. It still has the same, square shape, but this LED strip can change the color depending, and it kind of tells you if both of the transmitters are connected, if it needs to be recharged and all of that. And you can also, there's I think 3 settings for input gain. So there are things you can set it different. You can change some settings even though you don't have an LED display, LCD display. But basically, the cool thing about this is that they said this is going to be free for everybody who already purchased the Wireless Micro, which is amazing. Not everybody. I think there is some limitation. If you are in the US for some reason. You cannot add it for free to your purchase, but we have to clarify this because I'm sure there's still a way for people in the US to get it for free. If you are an existing Wireless Micro user and you bought one of those kits, which is around $150, I think, you can now just register your product on their website, just pay a small fee for the shipping. It's like a flat rate fee, and then you will get this camera receiver in the mail, which is amazing, of course. I mean, it's literally a present.
That's a customer service.
That's really great customer service. And I'm sure I speculated in the article why they do this, and it's probably because they see, of course, the competition opening up those systems that are made for smartphones and now also kind of making them compatible with cameras. That is really cool. Yeah. So you will have a system that is originally just made for your smartphone now also work on your mirrorless camera, for example. So yeah,
nice,
very nice gesture from Rode. It just requires you to register this. And actually the wireless micro system is it's not 150, it's around $130 or euros. So that's very affordable. Yeah, very cool. But you have to, like, if you want to get it, if you buy it now and you want the receiver, I think you have to order through Rode directly in order to get the free receiver. Okay.
Good.
Let's move on to Accsoon. Now, Accsoon, we all know as the, I would say wireless video company. They had a lot of very good wireless video transmitters where maybe a month ago or so, we released a written review of their CineView Master 4K transmitter, wireless video transmitter, which is a 4K transmitter, which works really well and reliably, especially, even if you only need it for HD. But they at NAB already announced and showed us that they're going into the monitor game, which is interesting. So we're now also getting monitors from Accsoon, which is like camera monitors, specific
recording monitor, yeah.
Also with a recording functionality. They're 7-inch. They're called CineView M7 and M7 Pro, with the difference being the M7 doesn't have the transmission wireless monitoring functions built in. The M7 Pro is a receiver for any Accsoon CineView transmitter. So you will not have to use a separate receiver when you use that monitor to receive the image. Now, in terms of, I think it's a very logical step. I already said that at NAB when doing the interview about these products when they were initially announced and now they are available. It's a logical step for Accsoon because they have always been really great with software. I mean, that's one thing that always astounded me is that even, like when you use the Accsoon CineView and the different, there are different products that actually work for smartphones. The cool thing is that their software, their app is very fully featured. So you're not missing anything. You have anything from peaking, you have false colors, you have an amazing waveform monitor, and all those things that you usually really only expect from higher end monitors, you already had in the smartphone app. And what they did is actually build a monitor based on Android. So this monitor, this 7-inch monitor, is running Android as an operating system with basically what is probably like a dedicated version of their Accsoon C app on top. So it makes total sense. Like we all know that all of those monitor advancements over the last few years, especially when we talk about camera monitors, are basically stemming from the fact that those are high volume products that are made for smartphones or tablets, right? So there's only very few panel manufacturers in the world, and manufacturers that make camera monitors usually source those screens from those very few manufacturers of those panels, just like the smartphone makers do. So they can reuse what's there, what was originally made for smartphones or tablets. They can just put that into a nicer housing, add like more professional connectors, and have a really good monitor, which gives you high contrast ratio, great brightness, and all those things that were originally designed for the mass smartphone market. And that's, I guess, exactly what Accsoon did here as well. Very smart move. It's also, like it's an HDMI monitor. But what you already mentioned, what's special about it is that it can also record. Now, I wouldn't see this as a replacement for a proper external recorder, like and when I say proper, I mean a device that was specifically made as predominantly a recorder, like for example Atomos. Like Atomos Ninja 5 or Shogun products were really made to be used as recorders, which is why they also support things like ProRes RAW and all different kind of flavors of ProRes and so on, and different resolutions and so on. Now this also offers recording, but only 4K H.265 and H.264. It doesn't do any more than 4K, and it doesn't do ProRes. But that's not its main purpose, right? Its main purpose is monitoring, but you can use it for recording as well. And of course, it makes total sense if you're, like quick turnaround content. It has an SD card slot, and you can also connect an SSD or external hard drive or whatever through USB-C. So it's very cool actually that this is capable of doing that, and it's actually also 4K, right? So yeah.
You know why the price is similar? It's $899 for both models, and one is with wireless transmitter receiver, and one is without. I would have expected the one without to be cheaper. It's a bit surprising that at least the US dollar price is similar on both.
That's true. I don't know. Actually, I from the press release which I wrote, the Pro is actually $899 and the M7 is $799. But I see that on B&H, you're right, that the Pro is $799, and let me see, it doesn't actually say.
No, both are $899 at B&H right now.
Oh, wow, they changed it. So it must have changed overnight, actually, because our website is still showing $799, and now they're both $899. I think that must be a mistake. Let me write to B&H about that, because this can't be right. I mean, they're both the same price now. Yeah, you're right.
Okay.
Yesterday it was $799, so I don't know. I'm sure it's $799 and $899. So yeah, so it's $100 difference. I would definitely go for the wireless receiver version of this. Yeah, and I think, I mean, in general, I've always been impressed with Accsoon products, to be honest. I think in terms of reliability and also the wireless connection of the CineView Master 4K is really good. And like I said, the software is also good. So they do put a lot of effort into that product, and it shows. I think this should be quite successful. So yeah, let's move on to a little bit of tiny light news. We don't have a lot of light news this week, but we have one tiny light, the NANLITE Pico RGBW pocket light.
It's a matter of taste. I think that what we see from NANLITE, and usually we are used to see bigger fixtures from NANLITE, and suddenly we have something really small, very portable, almost has a retro look to it, something that we used to see a few years back. But this is what, $35 I think, for content creators or those who really need placing small lights, either magnetic in a magnetic way or just to put them around. Maybe that's a nice solution. It's only 130 grams. As you said, it's RGBW LED light. The CCT range is 2,700 to 7,500. You also have green and magenta adjustments, which is really great for the skin tones. CRI, TLCI is 95, and the output is 4,211 lux, like 30 centimeters away in 5,600 Kelvin. You have 14 built-in effects, and the yoke, the little yoke, you can obviously change like 12 adjustment that you can position the light. USB-C charging, and the nice thing that it can be controlled with the NANLITE NANLink. That's the app from NANLITE. So, and of course, the framework can also be updated if there's any update in the future via the USB-C. So this is something small, but maybe useful for content creator, mostly people that just need to lead themselves in a small room like this and be sure that there's sufficient light on their face. Yeah, I mean, I didn't expect NANLITE to do something so small and maybe cost effective in the sense that it's really basic. But on the other hand, why not? They didn't have this in the range, and yeah, welcome to the family. I guess that's what they say.
Yeah, I think it's great, especially that it's also magnetic, which makes it so versatile. Of course, you can just put it somewhere, and I mean, there's a very nice demo video that they made, and you see somebody putting it into a fridge, which is, it's a perfect use case for that.
Absolutely, inside the fridge.
Inside the fridge, yeah. All right, so that is available now, I guess, and $34.9. Crazy. Let's move on to our last section here. Well, the last two sections, actually. I mentioned at the beginning that I want to talk about this educational article, Extra Shot for Safety, Yes or No, Various Approaches to Coverage. I had to leave a comment on this article because I love it so much. It's complimenting Masha on this because she's talking about what coverage actually means and the different approaches that people have to it. Now, we all know that there are directors out there who like to overshoot, right? I mean, when I talk about coverage, I mean specifically, this is really targeted mostly at narrative filmmaking in this case. Of course, coverage for documentaries is often different because you don't know what's happening, so you need a lot of shots, which doesn't mean you shouldn't have a plan, right? You should make a plan and then stick to it ideally. But very often, if you have to go with the flow, you try to capture as much as possible and you kind of craft the story, sometimes in post or much of it in post, and you have to adjust to circumstances. But when it comes to any scripted kind of filmmaking, you of course should plan properly. And there's two different approaches to that. Sometimes there are directors and DPs, but usually following what the director wants, of course, that are literally overshooting a lot so they can make those decisions in post. Masha is quoting some examples. For example, Michael Bay, of course, known as this, like big budget Hollywood films that are lots of explosions and fights and stuff like that going on, who is notorious for overshooting. I mean, he's, his films are known for very, very fast cuts, like a literal orchestra of cameras to capture wide, medium, close-ups, overhead, POVs, and whatever simultaneously. And there's sometimes, 10 cameras running at the same time, which of course makes sense if you have an explosion or something like that, because you can only do it once, so you want to cover it as much as possible. Also for fight scenes that are sometimes very difficult to stage again in the same way, so you want to cover them with a lot of cameras. But on the other hand, it also means that, for, I would say, the more traditional filmmaking, when you talk about normal dialogue scenes and so on, overshooting can be a problem because it will create problems in post, and it can also mean that sometimes it's kind of a replacement for knowing what you want to do, right? Like if somebody's insecure on set, we've all been in these situations, maybe working with a director who doesn't have as much experience, and then they're like, maybe we should get another shot. Maybe we should do another take on that, even though we had a great take already. Or maybe we do another angle, even though we didn't plan for that. And then it kind of, the whole plan, the schedule kind of falls apart because you spend more time on a scene that you actually should. And then famously, you also have this maximalist route from people like Peter Jackson from The Lord of the Rings, who repeatedly said, one more for luck, even though, they already had what they needed. So, of course, in this film, lots of green screen, lots of post-production done. And so, I mean, there's some examples like Ian McKellen, who played Gandalf, had said, I did 24 takes the day before for 2 lines of text. I'm not going to do this again today. So it's like, there's these famous stories. And there's other examples which are the complete opposite. For example, Denis Villeneuve said in the Team Deakins podcast that he literally found himself feeling like a coward once when he repeated a shot too often in shooting something, and then he decided not to do that anymore. Right? He said never again, and basically that became his guiding light. So when he was shooting Sicario, he refused to go in for coverage after a perfect take of a wide shot, and then said, "Okay, that's it. We have to move on." I think there's also other examples. For example, like Alfred Hitchcock. I mean, he famously planned everything out perfectly in his films, and when there was a take that was good, he just moved on, often to the horror of his crew, where it was like, "What, really? We're done? We only did one take. Are you sure?" And then, "Yes, next." So that takes a lot of balls, and it takes a lot of experience to do that, of course, especially when you're filming a high budget production. So dive into that article if you're interested in this subject. It's of course very, very controversial also, especially for people who are repeatedly working in film, because they all know that there's a very, very different approaches when it comes to that topic from directors, and it's often the one thing that will cost so much time if somebody doesn't know or is never satisfied with what, like the coverage, or isn't properly planned out. And sometimes it's even the strategy to shoot as much as possible. But this is the one thing that can literally kill you on set when it comes to time, and also the morale of actors when they have to do things too often. So.
You don't have to be on big sets or those enormous high-budget films. If you've been working with a crew, if you've been with a director or a reporter, doesn't matter. We all know the drill. Just one more. It can be for luck. It can be for whatever. We used to laugh when the quality become quantity, like a weight. Like how much kilos of shots do you want? That's how we used to, because that it becomes like a weight and not anymore like a pleasure. And sometimes it's really show the insecurity of the reporter or director you're working with, and everybody around thinks like, come on, we're done. We have it in the basket. There is no need to do one more. But we all been there.
So I think this all comes back to basically also, it's often good to limit yourself. It's good to limit yourself in how much you shoot and really plan it out, because, like, if you plan, that's my motto always, if you have a good plan, there is room to improvise. If you don't have a plan, all you do is improvising. So basically you don't know what you're doing if you don't have a plan. So, and that also means that limiting yourself often is very good for creativity. And that's like the Sony camera we just talked about, like you have a 35mm lens, you have to work with that. And there's whole movies, and that's also in this article, that have been shot with one lens. And that limitation also is very, very creatively stimulating, I think. Good example, actually, we just had the Emmy nominations, I think yesterday. And a series that both Johnny and I love, The Studio, on Apple TV Plus by Seth Rogen. If you haven't seen it, go watch it. It's amazing. We'll actually should try to get somebody from the crew on this podcast because it's just so funny. It's basically this behind the scenes comedy look at Hollywood and the processes within a studio to getting productions done. And usually the whole series consists of long takes. It's not that some of the episodes are actually one consistent take, but most of them are, coupled together by a couple of longer takes. And they're all shot on 35mm lens or 28mm lens. I think it's a 28mm Cook that they use for everything. And this is another good example how creative you can be if you limit yourself with the gear choice you make and then have to make it work, right? Another example, of course, was also for one takes, Adolescence, of course, which we talked about, also nominated for so many Emmys this year. So, like having more gear, having more choice, having more time doesn't necessarily result in a better product. So limit yourself, and also limit yourself in the kind of amount of takes you make. Just plan them out properly and you usually will have a better result. All right, let's move on to our AI corner, I would say. Let's start out with YouTube. So YouTube announced last week that they are gonna crack down on so-called AI slop with a monetization policy update. What does that mean? So basically, YouTube, like many other of those platforms, like also Instagram and so on, is currently suffering from the fact that you have a lot of fully AI generated content, whether it's photos or videos, of course, videos on YouTube, that people are creating channels which are consisting only of AI voices and AI images. And there is nothing, very often, not in every case, of course, very often there's nothing original about those things. You know, they're recreating stuff that's already there and kind of reformatting it in a way, and then kind of with the intention to produce as much content as possible in a very short amount of time. So all of that is monetized and they earn some advertising money with that. The problem is that, of course, you know, when we're talking about the literal cat video that YouTube got started with, the cat is now an AI cat that can do everything. You know, your mom probably already showed you a cat that is, you know, doing stuff that a cat cannot do. And she's very excited about that. And then you have to tell her that that's an AI generated video. We're talking about those kind of videos, and then kind of fooling people into believing that it's real in many cases. And those channels have been taking over, and the platforms are trying to find ways to kind of defend themselves against that. And YouTube's way right now is to demonetize those channels. So basically taking away the ability of those channels to earn money, which of course should take away the incentive to make this content in the first place. Because, you know, by the content itself, of course, there's nothing prohibiting or preventing people from doing that unless it's infringing someone else's copyright, you know, like you're recreating famous characters or whatever. So I think it's a bit of a fine line here, of course, because the question is, where do you draw the line? You know, like there will be more and more content that is AI generated, and there will be more and more, whether we like it or not, and there will be more and more videos that contain shots that are entirely AI generated, and it will be impossible for YouTube to identify those. Now, yeah, it's a bit difficult. Not all AI content will be demonetized, but you know, it says that YouTube said that AI assisted content can still be monetized if it's unique, significantly transformed, and provides added human value. Now, there will be a lot of fringe cases here, I'm sure, because I think it's, you know, only a matter of time when we all see that one video which is creative, but it's also probably not original. You know what I mean? It's like it's gonna be a fine line, and I wonder if they could even implement this in an automated way. But what do you think, Johnny?
It's like trying to chase something which is, you know, the horses are long ago gone, and I really wonder how they gonna be able to even determine what is what. And I think it's too little and too late. And if YouTube will not join forces with other platform, or actually those who are, and it's funny because YouTube is part of Google, yeah, and Google is the one that's actually responsible for a lot of the content that we're seeing now. So that should have been treated probably from the beginning in a completely different way, and to try to block it now, yeah, I think everybody should be concerned. Yeah, it's two different things. We can't stop AI. There will be a lot of footage. There will be a lot of content made with AI. Some of this is very useful, but on the other hand, we know that there will be a lot of trouble, like footage that is asking for trouble that will be out there, and let's see what they're going to do with this. I don't know. We don't have the answer for sure. Our duty is to report about advance of technology. Our duty as a publication is to educate people and let them and alert them. It's not that we are trying to promote AI. We are trying to let people know that they should be aware of the new technology that most probably, will change our field. Yeah, so just to be ignorant is not a solution here. That's our.
Well, I think I think you made a good point. I think it's, Google, of course, I mean, has one of the most popular models now when it comes to AI video generation, with a VO model, specifically VO3, which is one of the most convincing video generative models out there now. Now, they would definitely have a way to kind of basically check every video whether it contains shots that were generated with VO3 and then automatically label all those videos, right? That should definitely happen. And I don't understand why this is not even discussed right now. They could also force probably other AI model companies like Midjourney, Runway, Sora, like OpenAI, Sora, and so on, to kind of carry some kind of metadata that is hidden that will tell the YouTube algorithm or whatever that this is an AI generated video. Of course, that is difficult because metadata can be removed or whatever, but there might be a way for them to do that, and then automatically, I think that would be a way to go forward, right? So you have, and it's not even on a video per video basis, it will have to be on a per shot basis inside a video. Because if I see a video which is 90% real footage and then 10% is AI generated, I might even be less aware that this is AI generated because I saw the rest of the video. I already expect this to be real video. So, and then it's not. So I'm not even, like, my sensors, my AI sensors are not even aware of the fact that this could be AI. But if they were to individually label those shots, and I'm talking about entirely AI generated videos, like shots, that would make a lot of sense. And I think, like you said, I think Google should absolutely crack down in that way, kind of have their lab division cooperate with YouTube on that, and then also try and force the other model makers into providing some kind of info to them about that.
It will get even more complicated, because we know that the next generation will actually mix reality and AI. It can be
well, that's already happening.
Yeah. I'm just saying that's the next best thing. Like, it can be a whole like the surrounding might be completely real, and whatever is happening in the shot is AI generated. Yeah. So let's see. I mean, I don't think everybody's running with thinking about how to monetize and not about the consequences. That's how it looks by the big manufacturer.
Yeah, that definitely needs to be regulation around that stuff. And I guess it's only lawmakers that can help with that. But it doesn't look like this is happening anytime soon. Good. Let's move on to Eddy AI. Now, Eddy AI announced a scripted mode for their plugin, right?
Yeah. So Eddy AI is an AI-powered assistant editor. It's not. That really should help you when you edit and not to replace anybody. It's just a matter of how to use your time in a more efficient way. I quite like what those guys are doing, and we are following the development of the app. And the latest thing is the scripted mode, which I personally am very thankful. And we haven't tried it yet, and this is something that I will put into trial very soon, because what this can help us both when we are doing reviews. For example, we are writing what we are about to say. We're using a teleprompter, and then we are literally reading in a very natural way in order to save the time here. Now, Nino is a professional, but I have a face for radio. I'm sometimes really struggling with either the reading, or I just prefer to talk normally, and then I'm stumbling quite a lot. So obviously, when I go to edit, it takes me longer to edit myself and kind of cut out the mistakes that I made and so on. So if I literally put my script into Eddy AI and then put the footage in, Eddy should be able to match the good takes with my script. And then, since it's really integrated with Adobe Premiere, they have this plugin, Final Cut Pro and DaVinci Resolve, I can open a project with what Eddy AI gave me, and I think it will give like 2 or 3 options to choose from. So that can be a real time saver if this is really working as advertised. I think this is a kind of a game changer, at least for my own workflow. Yeah, because that means that I can literally give up all the time that I look into the footage and move the bad takes. I hope that the next thing will be removing all the me, zigale, be. Yeah, because of course when we are talking into the camera, we are sometimes not really aware, or we are aware, but you have a lot of those and if that can be removed too, that will be really great.
Yeah, let's give it a try. Let's see how it goes. I said before, I like everything that kind of means that I don't have to do an assembly edit, like this basic edit of my own footage, and then really start working. I think that's very, very useful. Okay, last but not least, from the AI series here of our news corner, we'll talk about a new video model that was just released. It's called Marey, from a company called Moonvalley, and it's dubbed a commercially safe AI video model. Now, this company has been working with filmmakers to train their model, and also, allows you to give very specific prompts like camera control. You can have handheld simulation. It's 3D aware for scene manipulation, pose adjustment, and will have shots are actually editable post generation, which is kind of cool because that's something that a lot of those models don't allow for yet. So, for example, reframing and changing the backgrounds will be possible. They say it's based on a lot of content or all of the content is commercially safe, meaning they had the permission to actually train on that content, which is important because, well, as we all know, VO3 and Sora and all those are all accused of being, training their models on content that was not, kind of free to use for them to train those models. So yeah, this is quite interesting. And if you want to dive into that, of course, there are other concerns about AI other than the fact that, it's not only being trained on the copyrighted material. I added a bit of opinion here because we're simply fearing that production and post-production jobs will disappear in many fields because of the advancing technology. And I don't think there's much we can do about that, but that's a fact. And also the much bigger discussion here is what is real, right? And what we just talked about with the YouTube topic and the AI Slop crackdown that they do on demonetizing that content is also true in general for how can we still tell what image is real and what is fake news and all its implications. So yeah, but I don't want to round off this podcast on such a negative note. I think Johnny wants to talk about something that he's working on.
So let's finish on a positive note. Remember the Sony FX2? So I got it back for just a few days, and I'm trying to create some nice, lovely footage with the Blazer Mantis, the 133 anamorphic lens. And the beauty of this lens that it's really trying to imitate 1.5x crop discrete images. So far, I really like this setup. Very easy to use. Of course, the lens is full frame because if you remember originally when I tested the FX2, I had the Apex on it, and that's our APS-C lens, so I had to crop a little bit the image. And this time, it's a full frame camera with a full frame lens, and in between, I have the Siri adapter that allows me to go from the PL mount to the Sony E mount. So hopefully by next week, for the next episode of our podcast, I hope that the footage is ready.
Awesome. Thank you, Johnny. And one thing we'll also talk about next week, which is something you might already have seen. We have a CineD app, and it's available for iOS and the Google Play Store yet. We're still ironing out some problems with it. It's already working. You can already download and use it. But we're going to talk about it next week and show you everything about the CineD app that has been literally in the works for over a year. So Johnny lost all his hair over it.
Actually, let's see how long it will take to iron the bugs. Maybe by then I have long hair again.
Good. All right. Okay. So thanks everybody for watching. Thanks, Johnny, for being part of this podcast. Also, don't forget to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you got your podcasts. Give us a good rating. Send this podcast to somebody who hasn't seen it yet. And see you next week. Thanks.
Bye.